The biggest wealth killers are not reckless decisions. They're actually middle-class habits.
So the first one, of course, is lifestyle inflation. And most of you guys know what that is. I mean, I think this is a hard one, right? Because I'm watching my kids go through it. They're in their 20s. And they're making, I don't know, 30 grand, and then they make 40 grand. And what do? They upgrade their car, right?
Yeah.
Then they make 50 grand, and, then they upgrade where they're living. And so I completely understand. I completely get this, right?
Yep.
But it's really, really difficult to consciously be disciplined here.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people start to make more money, they obviously want to spend more money. And I think that a lot of that too is, competing against the people you're around, because you're like, well, I want to prove that I'm doing good too, or I want to prove that I don't want anyone to think that I'm not doing well. And I think this is especially true for people that come up from a poorer background, right? Or a middle class background, and they're trying to prove something to themselves and to their family that they're getting out of that. And the way they look at getting out of it is a nicer car and a nicer apartment and a nicer, purses and things like that, where those aren't really wealth building.
Did you say nicer purse?
Yeah, girls getting purses. That's the thing,
gosh.
right?
I don't even think about that.
Yeah. But it's stuff like that that's very interesting because, whenever we see people that are really flashy, we don't ever think that those people are wealthy.
Well, I can tell you right now, like we live in Scottsdale, which is the purse capital of the world, I think. I mean, like Danielle and I went to this new restaurant. What was the name of that? Oh, Jing. Yeah. Anyway, we roll in there, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh, these people are dressed to the nines, and I know for a fact, they're,
Right.
that they don't have that kind of cash to throw around. And I'll tell you, it's really, really interesting. This is hard. By the way, we are not talking about a mode of transportation that's reliable or not reliable. I want to be clear there. We're not, obviously everybody can have a purse, but can they have the purse, or, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
So this is not a situation. Obviously you're going to upgrade if you can't get to and from somewhere, but this is like, even my kids they're doing this right now. Although my youngest isn't. Cade, my son Cade, I tell you, he's had a Jeep for like 8-9 years now.
Yeah, he's going to ride that thing.
Yeah, he's going to run that thing straight into the wall, which is completely fine with me. My other son, however, Kyle, if you're listening, he loves his cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's always stretching a little bit. But then we went over to his house. I think we said this before. He bought a house, and the backyard, the lawn was up to my knees, right? I'm like, Kyle, oh, seriously? So anyway, but the point is the priority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the shifting of priorities. What is a priority? He's going to learn that fast.
And now a word from my paid sponsor, PadSplit. Look, if you've been trying to make single-family rentals pencil out in this market, you already know that the math can be tight. With high rates, properties that would have cash flowed 5 years ago now often break even at best. So what do? You wait on the sidelines and miss out, or maybe you find a better model? That's why I want to talk about today's sponsor, PadSplit. Here's an example of the math in some markets. A 4-bedroom renting for $2,700 as a traditional rental may be able to gross over $6,000 a month in a co-living setup through PadSplit, depending on location, occupancy, and costs. The same house can potentially more than double the gross revenue in the right market. And before you think, that sounds like a headache, PadSplit helps with member screening and rent collection while still allowing you to operate the property and make management decisions. This is one strategy investors use to try to make deals work when traditional rentals don't pencil. If you want to see the numbers for yourself, go to padsplit.com/hosts. I'll have a link in the description. Just run the math on the property you already own and see if it's a fit. You might be surprised.
Let's move to number 2, which is, I think, a big one that, the lifestyle inflation is kind of obvious, right? But financing depreciating assets. And this is a big one that the middle class does. And a lot of this is, car leasing, or car payments
And I
on
think
a new car.
I think there's two things here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, what is a depreciating asset, number one, and then you have, what are you paying to buy that, which is kind of two issues. So it's like a double-edged sword here, right? And so it might surprise you guys to know that honestly, this is absolute truth. From the 30s, the 40s, and even into my 50s, I never actually personally ever bought a new car.
Yep.
Ever. Not one time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did I do that? I did that because I was always trying to find a car. Now, you guys know I love my cars, but I was always trying to find a car with, 5 to 10,000 miles on it, a year or two old, that had already kind of taken that hit. And I never leased a car in my life, not once, even though, they kind of make it sound like it's a business expense and all that kind of crap. But at the end of the day, so I was always pretty conscious around this personally. And so therefore, in my life, I probably had a lot of cars, Danielle.
Yeah, a lot of cars.
At least 30, 40 cars, easy, maybe more. But I never got burned on a car.
Mm-hmm.
I always bought the car. I always kind of looked at, like, all right, had it been depreciated? But this is something that I see my friends do all the time. They go buy something new, and the minute you hear the story, you drive it off the lot, it's worth a lot less, and it is. And then, of course, the financing piece is the other one, right? The high cost of that.
Yeah, and there's just a lot that goes into that, right? Because like I have friends that have bought like, oh, I'm going to go, from having a Toyota to a Mercedes, right? And they're willing to make the stretch, or a Range Rover. But then the servicing cost, the repair cost, everything on that car costs more. So you get yourself into this trap of, now you're driving a Range Rover, but now, you're not saving money and you're not investing and you're not doing other things because now you have this car payment, or you want to live in this one neighborhood and now you're financing this big mortgage, and then now you're not saving for retirement. So you're always just continuing to have to work to pay for this lifestyle that you're doing. And, we have a friend, Jeremy Scott, that has a big podcast, and his big thing is, he's made a bunch of money, but he still drives his old Honda.
I love
He's
that.
never switched cars. Yeah.
Right. And I know Warren Buffett has kind of a same story, but even when we, like kind of during the pandemic, whenever he's buying those RVs and stuff, like we went and bought that Airstream.
Yeah.
Danielle loved that.
We lost money on that though.
No, hold on. Listen to this.
Oh.
Here's what happened. Remember the guy bought it for his wife and drove it one way to Denver?
Yes.
And she didn't like it. So it had like 580 miles on it.
Yeah.
And then, so the guy shipped it back on a flatbed, but that person took like an $80,000 or $90,000 hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went in and bought it at a massive discount. And then we drove it for a year because this one didn't really like it. And then from there, I actually took a hit too. So I was like, oh man, I thought I made a good deal here, but it ended up being a less of a hit. It was probably 30, 40 grand, but I still did take a hit. So now we did put, I don't know, 6, 7, 8,000 miles on it or something, because we drove all over the country. So I suppose that was something. But the point is, I'm always really trying not to buy new, right, if I can. And I think it's important, no matter what it is, on a boat, on an RV, on a car, and what, just look at what depreciates. And there's a whole heck of a lot of people that do that. If you can buy, just, call it gently used, I guess is probably a good word. You can really, really change the direction. And of course, the financing piece is a big one. If you're going to, try to keep that in the 5-6% range if you're going to do it at all. But this is a really, really big one, because this one sets people back a lot.
But it is what people do. Like I have friends, they just bought a business, they're starting to do well, and now, they're going to buy a boat. You know what I mean? And it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that, like, to be clear, but you do have to understand, like, are you saving for retirement? Are you investing that money? Or are you just buying a boat and then putting that stuff on the back burner? Because you're never going to get financially free if you keep taking on payments.
Well, and one other thing is the whole point, if you think about it, is for them to keep you in negative equity situation. I mean, if you owned a boat dealership or a car dealership or whatever, obviously what you want is a customer for life. So you're going to put them in a position to where there's only so many miles you can drive a year, and you want them to come into you with a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 negative. It's because what do? They just, no problem. We just roll it into the next one. And so they just keep kicking the can down the road. And so this is a big one that's right under everybody's noses. It's easily solvable.
That's my biggest thing with car leases, right? Like I've never done a car lease and I didn't really understand them. But then now talking to people that do them, I mean, they basically, you have a big bill at the end of the lease, but they say, instead of paying that bill, we can just roll you into a new lease. And then people do that. But then that debt doesn't go away. It just rolls into the new lease. And then when that lease is done, they're like, well, now you have this debt and this debt, or we can roll you into a new lease. So, by the end of the lease, if people want to ever get out of a lease, they have this big bill that can't be financed, has to be, paid in full, that they have to come out of pocket on. And so they really get you. So you have to really think like, why am I leasing this super nice car? Would it make more sense to just buy a super used car and just drive that until I'm more financially stable and I can actually afford a car?
Yeah, I'm telling you guys, this is a really, really simple one, and I've been doing it my whole life. I love it. It's like a flipping game. I always try to buy something and then try to exit for at least what I paid, and I've been really pretty good. I would say I probably have about a 70% success rate, but it's always on my mind. I'm always looking because I only like to hold things for 2-3 years, let's say. And once the warranty gets kind of, at that spot where I don't want to have to spend cash, then I usually exit right before that. But you can do this very, very easily.
So the next thing is living on monthly payments. And I think that this was always an issue, but I think even more with this new generation, and you have all those, every time I go to buy something online, it's like, would you like to break this up into 4 equal payments, or would you like to pay this now? And, so that's a big thing right now is people are always just solving for their monthly. And I think that can be good on things that you absolutely have to have. I think it can be very bad on, oh yeah, I can make this payment to buy, this purse, or I can make this payment to buy, upgrade my computer or whatever it is, and that you don't really need. And so I think that when it comes to living on monthly payments, no one's ever trying to just say, hey, I'm going to save money and then just buy this straight out. It's always payments, payments, payments. And that always adds to your monthly bill.
Yeah, this is again. The other thing to watch here is when they lower or spread out the term. So a term, of course, is 24 months, 36 months, 48 months, 60 months, whatever it is. So this is another technique that people do when you finance things, and a lot of people don't think of the term. They're like, they don't really think past next month. So if it's 2 years, obviously it's paid off in 2 years. But if it's 5 or 6 or 7 or even 8, I'm seeing, on lots of stuff, you've got whatever you got, it's depreciated, but then you just kick that term out. So be careful, look at both. Don't just look at the monthly, look at the term. Because what you also want to do, if I was in your shoes, I personally wouldn't want to finance anything more than 2 years. Right? I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, a car payment or something, you might have to finance.
A car might
longer.
be a little different.
But you don't want to do like they're offering 8-year car loans now. I mean, is the car even going to last 8 years? Especially if you're not buying a new car, that starts to get dicey.
Yeah, and so if you can force yourself not to go outside of maybe 4 or 5 years at the very most on some big ticket like that, because most people keep their cars at least that. Well, what you're doing, just like anything, guys, is you're paying it down. And you're not paying it down as quickly. This is like that 50-year mortgage that everybody's kind of that controversy, right? So that monthly, don't get caught in the cycle of my monthly payment is lower because the terms have been kicked down the road, because that's another trap. Because just like a lease, you're going to walk in one day and you've been paying on this thing for 3-4 years and you're not even halfway, and you just don't want to get into that scenario.
So now we're going to get into one that's a couple that are a little more contentious here. So treating your primary home as your only investment. So this is a big middle class thing that people do. And that's basically you put all your money into your house that you're living in. You continue to upgrade your house over the years, and then it's your only investment. And it's not like the worst thing in the world to have, a fully paid off home that's your only investment. But there are much better things you can do that can accelerate you from the middle class.
Right. This is the biggest issue, right? Like, because you guys already know everyone who owns a home, if you are in that category, that probably for the majority of you is where you have most of your money, right? Here's the interesting thing, and most people don't look at it as an investment. So, I'll challenge you a little bit here. I mean, they're glad they're living in it and it's going up, but I don't think what they do is they look at their stock portfolio with a little bit more criticism than they do their actual home.
Right.
So I think this is a little bit of a mindset issue too. You guys all know most people, they invest in the stock market through a financial planner or wealth manager or something like that. They actually pay more attention to that. They watch it online and all this stuff, right? Meanwhile, their house is going up $1,000 a month. Like, and it's not even on their radar, right? And so next thing you know, if they're there a long time, there's a fair amount of equity for whatever reason. One, they're paying it down, but two, appreciation is doing its thing and inflation's doing its thing. So, so I think the first thing is if you started to look back to your point, if you treat it as your only investment, if you start to look at it as an investment, then I think you'd be more intentional and you start to take a look at, well, maybe if this is really, really working extremely well for me, and it has for my parents and has for all my siblings and has for all my friends and everybody else that I know, maybe I shouldn't consider something other than dumping my money with some financial planner that I don't meet with more than once a year. Like, it's just so obvious to me, but this one really frustrates me because, I mean, it's good that people have this kind of equity in their homes. That's really good, actually. It's what saved my mom. My mom's a hairdresser, and her net worth is sitting in her home, and that home is paying for her care. Like, it's huge, right? It is her savings account, and for many of you guys don't think out that far, but the reality is the equity in your home is going to show up at some point in the biggest way that you know.
Yep. And then the next one is saving but not investing. So I think this is a big one for people. Like, I have friends that are in the middle class, I would consider, and they just save money, but they're afraid to put it in anything. Like, they have a bunch of cash they're sitting on. They're afraid to buy a rental property because they're afraid it'll go down. They're afraid to invest in crypto because it'll go down. They don't know enough about the stock market, so they just sit in cash. And if you've sat in cash over the last 5 years, your net worth has went down, even if it stayed the same or on paper went up.
Yeah, and by the way, so this isn't a black and white issue. So it's not you should save or not save, or you should invest or not invest. You should absolutely have cash on the sidelines for dry powder scenarios or emergency scenarios, and figure out what that is. I know people where it's just 1 month of income. I know people where it's 1 year or more. Like, so it's whatever you're comfortable with. But that's a strategy. You absolutely have to have what I would consider to be cushion. And if you're a real estate investor, obviously you have to have, like what we're doing right now, Ross and I, we are literally putting together our dry powder for this buying time. So there's a reason why you need cash. What Danielle's talking about is that you have a lot of cash and you think that is savings, or you think that that's investing, right? But yeah. It's a cost. There's a cost to it. You're making very little on it, and it's not keeping up with inflation. So if you're making 2% on your money, or even 1% in a savings account, let's say, I know you can move it to something and maybe make a little bit more. I get that. But even both those scenarios don't keep up with inflation. So the cost that things are going up expense wise, in the grocery store, and your rent, your food, whatever you want to pick, it doesn't really matter. Gas. That stuff's going up faster than you're saving. And I think that's the issue. So you got to be cognizant of what your savings account is making, what inflation is, and what you're spending. And then from there, it's just simple math. And you just want to beat it. Just a good rule of thumb for us is you want to be north of 5% on your cash, if you can be. north of 5%, you're going to be in the money. You know, if inflation's 2-3%, you're still going to be making more than inflation. So whatever that means to you, you know, so there's not a problem to have cash, but unfortunately the way to to do that is you have to actually pull it out. Now, when people hear the word invest, I think sometimes they get a little freaked out, right? They consider all this risk, but you can move it into products, you know, CDs or treasuries or things like that. Just be cognizant of what it's costing you of sitting there in a bank account, and that's why Robert Kiyosaki in his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, you know, I think the very first chapter is savers or losers. That's what he meant. He didn't mean you personally are a loser. He means that you're losing if you're sitting there in savings, and so there's a cost.
So the next one, and this is going to also ruffle some feathers, is relying only on your 401k for retirement. A lot of people, they just give their money to a financial planner. The 401k can make sense, especially if your employer is doubling it. But most people don't even self-direct those 401ks. So they just kind of assume they're going to be fine if they just keep putting X amount in every month.
Well, let's unpack a little bit of that. So self-directed means that you can put money into a 401k and get all the benefits, and maybe your employer matches and all that kind of stuff, and that's awesome. Self-directed means that you move it outside of their 401k plan into a self-directed 401k plan. It's like a bank, but self-directed means you get to invest it, right? So I think the system you guys all know is set up for you not to understand how to invest your money. Somebody else is better. So, you know, if you're going to take that position, then good luck. You know, and so we're trying to empower you to understand that these, if you know, and you should know that a lot of these people that are investing your 401k money are commissioned salespeople. Mm-hmm. Let me say that again. These are commissioned salespeople. So they're putting you I'm not kidding. This is exactly how it works. It's no different if you're going to buy a piece of jewelry and they're on commission. It's no different if you're going to buy a car and they're on commission. The difference is Wall Street's made it seem like it's so different, but it's not. Now, and so if you're sitting behind the desk and they're investing your money, what are you going to invest it in? You're going to invest it in things that make you the most money, the most commission. And so there's this whole underbelly going on behind the scenes of different products trying to get to those commission salespeople to offer them incentives to invest in their products. So it's a whole companies, and it's a system. So once you really understand that, then just maybe you'll take your 401k seriously. By the way, having an employer match and all that stuff is awesome, but you need to take your own financial responsibility for your own money. And you know, I remember even mine. This is hysterical, actually. You know how our Wells Fargo manager calls like once a year, right? And every year it's somebody new, like every single year. I swear, for 10 years, I've had a different person every single year. I won't mention the financial institution because it's actually irrelevant. But like you guys, I put money into this different thing. And so I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I go, I'm obviously study metals. I go, I want to put all of it into a silver ETF. And you guys know I hate ETFs, right? Like I'd rather do physical silver, right? But this was all they had in their list of products. So I put it into a silver, and I put it in at $19. I looked the other day. So I have a lot of shares, like a lot, thousands and thousands, of shares of this at $19. And all of a sudden, I looked the other day and it, because silver went up over 100. Now, what happened there? What happened there is I called my guy. I knew what I wanted. I told him what I wanted, and he did it. That's the difference. What a lot of people do is they call and they're like, "What do you think? What do you think?" And then, of course, he's got a list of that they want to put you in. And so it's just it's not that you can unplug from that system. You don't have to, but you should be able to manage your financial planner at least and tell them, like, you should be looking at these things. What's oil doing? What's silver doing? What's gold doing? What's water doing? What's timber doing? What's this company doing? What's Apple doing? What's Nvidia? Is it Nvidia? Yeah. What are they doing? Like those are things that you should be asking.
Yes, absolutely. And then, so let's move on to the next one, which is overspending on degrees without a return on investment.
Yeah.
So I see this happening a lot in both the lower and middle class, especially with their kids, like, especially, some of you might be past the college stage, but now your kids are going to college, or maybe you're in your 20s and going to college. And a big middle class trap is getting stuck in student debt. And I have friends that are stuck in student debt, and it prohibits you from buying a home. You're basically taking on a mortgage, right? So if you're going to take on this mortgage, you better make sure that it's a good return on your investment.
Well, I think, again, this is a marketing campaign by the universities and higher education. Again, like, you are the product. When you go to when you're a freshman, sophomore, or whatever, you are the product. You are paying them, and you are their customer, period, right? So how do they keep you there? They keep you there through kicking a can down the road. Now, it can absolutely work, right? Like, I was talking to a young man yesterday. We had a little house party, and he's going through an engineering program, right? And it's a track he's on, and he's going to come out with an extremely good job and a high-paying job compared to what he's used to, right? So it absolutely can work, but it can also not work. And I think that's the difference, right?
Well, you have to be honest, though, with what you want to do. So I had this girl, she reached out to me, and I met her for coffee last week. And, she went through her undergrad, and she barely took on any debt because she had a lot of scholarships. And now, she's debating going to law school. So she's like, I think I want to go to law school. Da, da, da. And I just looked at her and I said, okay, have you shadowed a lawyer? Do you know for sure that's what you want to do?
Has she heard of AI? Seriously, like,
that too.
Come on, like, right, come on.
Well, that too, but I also had a conversation. I go, okay, and we were kind of, talking about life. And I said, are you going to want kids? Yes. Do you want to be working full time if you have kids? No. Okay, so there's just these are real questions. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to go to law school and you're going to take on $200,000 worth of debt, because that's basically what it is, that can prohibit other things you want to do in your life. And is that really what you want to do? Now, if you're like, I want to be an attorney, I'm going to commit to it, I want to be like one of the best attorneys in the state, that's different. Then it's probably worth it. But if you're like, well, this is kind of my next step until hopefully I can settle down and have kids, like, you have you have a mortgage payment, and you can't get out from under that. So these are
let's
real
bring up one other
conversations.
thing. So if you get married, guess who else has that mortgage payment?
Right.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Or it's not a mortgage payment, a student payment.
I had a friend, she went to school to get her nurse practitioner, and, she ended up, meeting somebody, getting married, and, they had to pay off that debt, and she doesn't even work full time at that anymore. She doesn't even, and she still has to work a couple days a month just to kind of pay that payment,
Now, to be fair, it can work the other way too, but just understand that student debt is a thing, and when you guys connect and get together and build a family, you both are walking into the even though you're educated, and this is a big deal, and we know people that actually have decided not to actually get married, and so they can put all of everything into one side of the equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's a real thing. And even for me, like, I was a teacher, like, teaching does not pay any money. Now, when I got a degree, it was only like $30,000 or $40,000. So while that's a lot of money, it's not astronomical. Now these degrees are well over 100. So does it really make sense to take on $120,000 of student debt to then be a teacher and make $40,000 a year? Like, does that make any sense? Or would you just be better off?
Well, let's break that down
else?
though. So let's just do the math. $100,000, and how much you save? How much can you actually save if for a $40,000 a year salary?
Nothing.
Okay, let's just say you can save $5,000. Okay, that's a 20-year payoff.
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's without interest.
Well, I was going to say
expense.
that's without interest. Yeah.
So you just got to do the math. Like it's nuts, right? And the when Danielle came home, God bless Danielle, she's trying to mentor this girl, and the girl reached out to you and said, I'd love to sit down, but she wasn't really listening.
She wasn't. I mean, she was on that. I did get her attention on that. There's other things, that the colleges go through. But on that, I feel like I did get her attention on that.
The thing is there's you guys with how fast moving AI is happening right now. There are investments being made at the public institution level that will not be paid back for a long time because those jobs, so another way, you should be looking at the short-term investment today, whether or not, like the lawyer is just a classic example. You guys know this. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day. They said, in that world, a litigator's probably good because they have to stand up in front of people. But other than that, like there's that industry is getting collapsed. So is medical. Mm-hmm. Medical is really, really being challenged right now. Not badly. It's just the customer, the patient can now. We had a friend that went and did his blood work with a lab, not a doctor, and then put it into his AI model for his for the medical side, and it kicked out the stuff. Then he took those results to his doctor, and they were almost very, very similar, almost the same. Mm-hmm. And so there are just tools out there. And so all of a sudden you start to look at these little things that people are doing and using. And you got to wonder, is it worth $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 of an investment and time for something that may or may not have a payout later?
So then let's go to the last one. And this one I think is the most important, is ignoring taxes and financial strategy. And, all growing up, nobody ever talked about taxes or financial strategy. Like that was something you just never had heard of. You just work, you pay your tax, you save your money, you invest your money, you buy things, and that's the end of the story, right? We're hanging out with Ken and the people he surrounds himself with. It is all about tax strategy. Everything's about tax because you're paying so much money in tax, and there are ways that you can mitigate that, right? And nobody in the middle class talks about that. So you could be doing everything right. You could be like, Danielle, I don't, waste any money. I'm investing. I'm, living within my means. I don't have any debt. But do you have a tax strategy? Because that is a huge one. That really divides the middle class and the upper class right there.
Well, it will be, this is quite a statement, but tax will be the largest expense of your life. Like, period. It just will be. So shouldn't you understand it, right? And a lot of people, it's funny. A lot of people believe it's patriotic to pay tax, right? And by the way, there are absolutely things that tax is used for, right? It's used for fire, police, and schools, and those kinds of things, right? And a lot of times everyone's bitching about how that money's being managed. That's a different issue altogether. But the tax is used and is needed for stuff. And to be clear, I pay millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars every single year through what? Sales tax, property tax, all these different kinds of taxes, right? Every time you fly somewhere, and like rental car tax and hotel tax, and there's taxes that show up everywhere, guys. Those are taxes. Okay, what everyone really focuses on is the IRS side of it, right? Your personal income tax. And there are things that you can do to mitigate that legally, right? Just the tax code is a series of tax laws and says this is how we can tax you. But it also has a section in there that says if you do these things, you get a tax break. So you're right. We don't learn this stuff, but when you actually start to figure out, like there are little things that you can do and get pretty nice little tax breaks. I know, like we're looking at this is an interesting one, but we're looking at buying a home sauna, right? And there's you can do that HSA, right? High savings account, which is pre-tax. And the company that we're looking at the sauna said, you can use your HSA account. Okay, so what is that? That's just being smart. That's just taking pre-tax money and investing in something that we're going to use for our health. That's what we're talking about here. It doesn't have to be this big rocket science type thing, right? There's all kinds of little ways.